Hi, everybody, and welcome to yet another recorded Zoom interview. This time, Ellensburg, Washington is talking directly to Berlin, Germany, and Dr. Alena Ebinghaus. Alena, what was the weather like today in Berlin?
Um, so I'm actually not in Berlin,
Oh, you're
but
not? Okay.
that's all right.
Yeah. Where are you?
Um, I'm in a small town east of Cologne.
Okay.
Yeah, but the weather is was fine. It's very spring-like.
Yes.
The rain stopped, and yeah, we spent some time outside today.
Very good. Well, thank you. It's a Saturday evening there, for goodness sakes, in Germany. So let's make this as efficient as possible. I'm just so curious about your work, why you were here in Eastern Washington. I assume there was some field work that you actually spent some time here close to Ellensburg. And viewers, I've been doing Geology 351 classes. We've been featuring papers by Barbara Nash and by Jennifer Kasbaum and many others who came to work in the Ellensburg Formation. And Alena is another person who has traveled the globe to come here. So, can you give us some backstory? Were you a PhD student doing this work for these papers?
Yeah, exactly. So I've done my PhD at the University of Aberdeen in the UK. And I started in 2010, and that was the same year I also came to the US for the first time for my field work. So basically, my former supervisors and their colleagues, they started working in Washington already for a while, and they set up the PhD study um, in order to get a bit more detail on the sedimentology in between the lava flows, in combination with some palynology.
Okay.
So we've been also looking at pollen and spores from that time, in order, well, to combine these data sets and to get a better understanding on how the environmental conditions change during LIP volcanism.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, in relation how the lava flows interacted with the drainage system and the plant ecosystem.
Okay. Well, I'm guessing. Please correct me. I'm guessing you grew up in Germany, maybe did some schooling there, and then you chose to go to Scotland for your
Exactly.
dissertation. And
Yeah.
and who were those mentors in Scotland that had already had interest in the Pacific Northwest with those sedimentary units?
So I worked with David Jolly and Adrian Hartley.
Hmm.
And well, the kind of background idea was they've been doing some work on the North Atlantic igneous province. Um, and well, most data from that province are from cores, from rock
Yeah,
cores.
yeah,
So because most of it is underwater, and
right.
so there's not much exposure apart from a few bits in Scotland and in Greenland, um, and also from the Faroe Islands. So
Hmm.
they were looking for another LIP that could be compared to the North Atlantic igneous kind of conditions. Um, so that's why they went to the US.
So yes,
And
viewers, these LIPs are large igneous provinces, and
yeah,
it's it's an ongoing effort to tie the large igneous provinces to mass extinctions and global warm times. And so, yeah, I'm starting to realize between Jennifer Kasbaum and others, people are coming to the flood basalts in the Pacific Northwest here in North America just to continue this type of work and work on timing. But you weren't really working with the basalts themselves. I know that was part of your work, but
mm,
was it mostly so I'm really enjoying the papers, especially our students are going to be reading your 2020 paper and they're going to be trying to
mhm,
get ready for the midterm exam coming next week.
very
So
good.
you're going to be part of the midterm. And and I like the fact that you're working so regionally. So I don't know, can you give us a sense of maybe tell us a few stories about coming out here to Washington. How did you
Mm.
get started? Were you just on your own, or were you with your professors and they were saying, we're going here and now we're going here and here's what this project should be? How much of it was you?
Oh, well, we started off with a recce, a 1 week recce, even before my PhD started,
Yeah.
and we met with a few geologists in Washington. There was Stephen Self,
Hmm.
who supported us at that time. We met with Steve Rydell. I'm sure you know him.
I do.
Um, yeah, and also with John Wolfe in Pullman.
Yes.
So they supported us a lot with like they gave us geological maps. They kind of showed us where good places are, good exposures. So we basically um, got some hints already. This is where you need to look for. Well, we were interested in the sedimentary interbeds. Not
Yes.
we needed, of course, also a good idea of the basaltic stratigraphy in order to identify where we are. But yeah, our focus were the interbeds, and
Hmm.
for this we really needed the help of geologists, like local geologists. And yeah, so we drove around a lot, and it was basically interbed hunting
Yes.
for a week. But yeah, then maybe just a month or two later, I came back with a PhD colleague to support me, and we were on our own, and we started looking for some more interbeds. We started logging them and collecting samples for about a month or so. And so, yeah, it was a little adventurous, of course. For me, it was basically the first time in the US.
Yeah.
So it was very nice. Anyway, I mean, the landscape is very fascinating as well. I mean, this vast landscape is nothing that we really know from Europe. Everything is pretty big, and
Yes.
people were very friendly and supportive. So yeah, we had a really good time, and I think overall I came back maybe 4 times or so. So I
Oh, you
was I
did.
was in
Okay.
Washington just for this project, I think 5 or 6 times.
Oh, wow. So these were
Yeah.
summers that you were out here? Are we talking like almost a decade ago that you were out here doing this field
Mhm.
work?
Yeah. So exactly. So 2010,
Yeah. Yeah.
11, 2012.
Okay.
So we would always come either in autumn time or just before summer, before it would get too hot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we would
Nice.
usually spend like a month or two. But like once I collected all the samples, my PhD colleague would go back, and I would spend another 2 or 3 weeks in Pullman in the lab
Oh,
and
okay.
prepare my
Yeah.
samples
Right.
for chemical analysis. So that was then kind of the second part of the field work.
Well, this is so good. This is so good. And I'm just getting started, to be totally honest. I'm just getting started into the details of your work, and I'm starting to wonder, how is your work different than what Hans Schminke was doing back in the 1960s, where he was trying to, I think he was doing basalt stratigraphy and trying to
Yeah.
name and group some of these interbeds.
Mm.
I get the feeling so far that you were wanting to put a regional story together. It seems like you're tying stuff over by Lewiston, Idaho with stuff that's at Vantage, Washington. Was that what you were doing that was different than previous workers? You're trying to come up with a coherent regional story?
Yeah. So my PhD work focused on mostly the central and western part of the
Mm-hmm.
Columbia River,
Mm-hmm.
LIP. Um, and yes, we wanted to really log those interbeds in a lot of detail and ideally get a three-dimensional pictures of them, which was really hard because most are just road cuts. So you just get a
Right.
two-dimensional view.
Yes.
But yeah, we revisited a lot of the sites that were already described in
Okay.
previous papers and also by Schminke.
Yeah.
he did really great work on putting the stratigraphy together. So we very much relied on these previous works. But then we went back and yes, we logged those interbeds, and we we did a detailed facies analysis. So we looked at the different lithologies. We put them in this, well, yeah, in a like uh, yeah, in a systematic scheme kind of, and then to
Yes.
identify what, or to describe what type of environmental conditions existed in different or in various parts of the basin at different times. And so this was something that has been done before, but yeah, as you said, not really on a basin scale. So just
Right.
individual beds were described. And we really wanted to put them into a bit more context to the overall volcanic activity, and how does volcanic activity influence the dimension and the distribution of those drainage patterns. Because we are talking
Eh,
about mostly fluvial and lacustrine environments. So how and why did they form in the way they did? So this is something that we really wanted to figure out. And so that was basically, let's say, 50 to 60% of my studies. And the other was looking at the plant ecosystems. And that hasn't really been done before, at least not
Okay.
in such a detail.
Yeah. Well, let's do both of those because recently in our little class, even with the Vantage Horizon, we can't decide, we can't make up our mind. Is this a river story? Is this a lake story? Is there,
Mm.
and there's water involved. And just yesterday, we were out at the diatomaceous beds that you probably visited over by Quincy, or maybe similar diatoms other places. Um, can you give us, especially during the Wanapum time, that's where we kind of are in the class. I know you've got your 6 chapters that you kind of broke out, but in the Wanapum time, it's mostly a river story, especially in the western side. Rivers coming from, do you remember that kind of detail from 5+ years ago?
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, well, most of them are fluvial settings. So we're
Okay.
looking at fluvial channels kind of finding their way through the lava field, or also re-establishing within the lava field, or they were pushed
Hmm.
aside.
Hmm.
Um, so if we are looking, for example, at the Vantage member, we are looking at a fairly uh, like quite wide, or like quite big fluvial environment. We
Yeah.
have a lot of different exposures from the Vantage time. They all look a little bit different, and but it's mostly fluvial. We've got, I think, some of those red beds further, like in the center of the lava field, where it was a bit more elevated.
Yeah.
This is what we think, where you
Yes.
have not much erosion and cutting into the lava field and depositing sediment, but instead you have weathering and the formation of soils. Um, and a lot of the Vantage member interbeds we found were actually more towards the margin of the lava field,
Hmm.
because we're on top of the Grand Ronde, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and between the Frenchman Springs. So the Grand Ronde lava field, they're pretty massive. So we think that pushed the drainage system to the margin of the lava field of the entire Columbia River Large Igneous Province. So the fluvial system that established within this volcanic hiatus
Yes.
afterwards, they kind of developed along the margin because that was simply the easiest pathway for them to form, rather than trying to erode back into the lava field. If you see what I mean, into the center of the lava field.
I do, yes. That tug of war back and forth. You're subsiding the basin. You've got another eruption coming in from the east. One of the narratives I've tried to establish, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with it as this course goes on. These classes are going to meet until mid-June, so we're not even halfway through the class. I'm trying to decide how much is Cascade sourced material in the
Mm,
Ellensburg versus stuff coming straight from the north or even from the east. And we're trying to use
mm,
any clues we can. If we got quartzite cobbles, we're not coming from
mm.
the Cascades. If we have muscovite flakes in a bed, I guess that's not a Cascade story either. Did you get
Mm.
that far with did you get out of the basin and decide how much was Cascade provenance for much of that material?
Yeah, I also looked at the provenance, the materials and composition of the sediments, and it is not, yeah, I think there are actually a lot of different source areas, and that makes it a bit tricky because you have so
Yeah,
much reworking happening.
right,
Um, because you don't just have fluid systems that are sourced from the lava field. They're actually coming from outside of the lava field.
right.
Mm, they're getting diverted by the lava flows. Some of them might actually um, enter the lava field, but they have the source areas outside. So you have, as you said, you actually have material coming from the Cascade. You have material coming from the north. Uh, and I think later on, uh, in the upper stratigraphy, like the Silo member and the Rattlesnake Ridge member,
Yeah.
we think they were actually sourced from further east. So yeah, you have a very diverse material. In the Vantage member, yeah, there's a lot of volcanic classic material in between, which to our understanding looks more Cascade material.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, I think it's mostly the Rattlesnake Ridge member, you
Yeah.
find some very coarse ash beds.
Okay, that's
Sometimes they're
perfect.
very thin. Yeah.
Yes, I just did this exact setup with Barbara Nash yesterday, and she did
Hmm.
all that Cougar Point tough work, as you know. I don't know
Hmm.
if you know Barb at all, if you collaborated with her
Not
or
not personally.
yeah,
I've read some of her papers. Yeah.
yeah. So she was fun to talk to primarily because she just kept saying, "Hey man, a bunch of this stuff in that basin is from the Hotspot track. It's
Hmm.
and you're kind of going in that direction right now, I think, if I'm hearing correctly,
Hmm.
that even your plant. So I've got a 2014, a 2015, and a 2020 paper from you, and all of these are at the website, viewers, if you want to read Elena's work. Um, so far with the plant paper 2015, I think you're saying there's a narrative that these lava flows are interrupting these basins and the plant communities are changing in response to local basalts. But I think your paper is saying it's more these hotspot tufts coming out of the sky from Idaho that are a major, they're playing a major role in disturbing the plant communities. Was I reading that
Yeah.
correctly?
Yeah, no, that's right. We were looking at these ash beds, and at least those coarse ones, they look more like they're coming from the Snake River Plain Hotspot track rather than
Yes.
from the Cascade.
Yeah.
I'm not really a petrologist or
Yeah.
volcanologist, so I wouldn't be able to go into a lot of detail
Right.
in terms of the composition, but yeah, it does look more like it's from the hotspot track.
Well, let's do two more things. You just put the kids to bed. You've had a long day. You're such a good sport to do this. Um, Do you have some favorite outcrops that you maybe visited more than once with those summers long ago? Favorite because they were surprising, or it was just a cool place that you just enjoyed scrambling around and sampling? For instance, one of my favorites is in Sentinel Gap itself, and I'm taking the students to this
Mhm.
Cougar Point Tuff quarry right above Mattawa in the Saddle Mountains.
Ah,
But
yeah.
do you have a few favorite outcrops somewhere in this whole Ellensburg Formation story?
Yeah, I have one. I would actually need to look at the map to remember what the road is called.
Okay, I can maybe help.
Let me
Yeah.
have a quick look.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
but I do remember, I think it's fairly close to the Hanford side, and it's on a main road, so it's a bit
Okay.
tricky to stop by
Yeah.
because you have major traffic passing by. But it's a very
Okay.
interesting outcrop. It's also Vantage member, I think.
Okay.
And it's quite a big interbed actually, but it's very messy because it got a lot of disturbance by lava flows. So it's very much stirred up by lava flows, and
Okay.
it's it's very interesting to look at. It looks very complex, and I did look at it, but I wasn't able to fully understand what's actually happening with this interbed, unfortunately. So this is also a spot where I would like to go back to.
Good. Well, let me stop
Um,
for you for a second. If you are you on Google Maps or something right now? Let me talk to the viewers for just a
yeah,
second and
wait.
give you a moment. Yeah, so viewers, this is I didn't know where I was going to go with this class, but I'm just following tips and leads from viewers, from students, from colleagues, and they're like, "Oh, you got to check out Elena's stuff, man. That stuff is great. It's exactly where you want to go." So, I have Google, no big deal. I'm just typing in Elena's name and figuring out how to find her. And so between her and Barbara Nash and Jennifer Kasbaum and Hans Schminke, who passed away just this past summer, I would have loved to have involved him with some of these recollections. It's just a fun way to try to bring people into this, personalities into this. And then, of course, it just feels like there's a whole new round of young workers working on this stuff. And I don't know if you had a sense of that, Elena, if you crossed paths with Jennifer Kasbaum or anyone else, but it felt like a few of you young folks were out in the field 10 years ago, kind of putting a little bit more juice into this set of beds.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot to do. Of
Okay.
course, I think the Columbia River is just such a fine example of a large igneous province because everything is on land. It's
Yeah.
most of it has easy access.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it's just a great place to study lava flows as well as what's happening in between lava flows. Yeah, it's world class, and I think there's uh, still some work to do, some work left, looking at some of those internet in a bit more detail and figuring out what happened on a very high resolution scale.
Hmm. What's an example of something that you feel like it's unfinished business if you had that detail?
So um, I've there's some of these Vantage and also I think it's the Squaw Creek
Yeah.
interbands, which
Hmm.
some of them are very muddy and they're not very thick. They're fairly thin, actually, just maybe a meter or so. But we looked at the pollenology, so the pollen and spores inside of these, and there's so much happening in terms of the vegetation. So this is something that I think could be studied in a bit more detail to like really figure out what happened just, on a very high resolution.
Hmm.
Not just, oh, we maybe have these type of plant at the beginning and these type of plants at the end of this interval,
Sure.
but what happened in between, and um, putting this into context with the volcanic activity.
Okay, two more things. You're doing a great job, by the way. Thank you.
Mhm.
Did you find the location of that vantage
Uh,
bed?
Not yet, but I'm
Okay,
working on
okay, all right.
it.
Okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's down by Tri-City somewhere, probably on a busy road. I can guess it's well, it doesn't matter. I think the other thing that I'd love to do before we hang up is talk about diatomaceous earth. And I basically said to my students, I don't even really understand what that stuff is, and I don't understand how pollen fits into this story at all. So, how do you
Mm.
describe what is the biology of diatoms in a freshwater lake? And then,
Oh,
do you
okay.
understand it? Yeah, I mean, I don't get it.
Cool. So to be honest, I didn't look at those diatoms in a lot of detail.
Okay,
Um,
that's fine.
uh, but as far as I know, diatoms need fairly nutritious waters,
Hmm.
and those diatomite, which is the rock that is made up
Yeah,
by diatoms, it's fairly, let's say, clean. There's not a lot of siliciclastic material in it, so
yeah.
it's very much pure diatoms, which means there was not a big of a fluvial input in these lakes. They were isolated lakes, basically. Um, um, and one theory is that they were fed by groundwaters rather
Oh,
than by small creeks or rivers. That's just an idea,
yeah. Okay.
uh, but that's
Interesting.
how it kind of um, that was kind of my best kind of idea how these lakes formed and how those big diatomite beds could actually form.
Okay, well, that's good. Thank you for it's not your expertise. What is your expertise is this pollen study stuff, and I don't feel like
Mm.
anybody else has worked with that at all. So I know almost nothing about palynology. Are there
Mm.
pollen grains in almost all of these Ellensburg Formation beds?
Yeah, we have a fairly good record actually, but they're not in every interbed, unfortunately.
Okay,
So what you're looking for are fairly fine-grained, muddy interbeds. So if you're in a sandstone interbed, your chance of finding some pollen grains are fairly low. There might be something in it, but usually the record is not as good simply because they're getting destroyed.
I see.
And what pollen grains also don't, like mechanically destroyed, and what they also don't like is oxygen. So ideally, you're in a um, in a fine-grained, muddy, clayey interbed, organic rich interbed, and that's kind of best preservation standards for these. So we found some good records from inside the Grand Ronde lava, like interbeds,
Okay,
where within like floodplain deposits. So again, you're in a fine-grained unit. Um, and then yes, Squaw Creek was great because we had a lot of these like thin interbeds, mud rich, organic rich, but also some from the Vantage actually. So
oh
yeah, we
wow,
got
okay,
that was probably, yeah, these were actually the best interbeds. And if when we went a bit further up, it was getting a bit tricky. Like in the Rattlesnake Ridge, we found some good spots, but again, if you're in a conglomerate or anything like fairly
right.
coarse grain, it's
Right.
hard. Yeah. You need to, yeah, you get your samples and you get those samples to a specific lab. You need to apply kind of a mixture of different acids to these rocks in order to get everything out apart from the pollen grains. So it takes some time. It's quite
Sure.
time consuming.
Well,
Um,
yeah, please forgive my ignorance, but I don't know what the benefit of studying the pollen is.
Mm.
Is it a climate thing, or what are we doing with the pollen?
So we were interested in, yes, you can do some climate studies. This is one very important point. We were not so much looking at the climate. We used what we're more looking into, what we wanted to know is some more input on the sedimentary environments, because you can have um, we okay, we identified these are some floodplain deposits or some channel deposits.
Yeah.
That's nice, but what else is there? Because we wanted also to know a bit more about the vegetation and how
Mm,
vegetation uh, develop over time as well as laterally within the sedimentary environment. So we just wanted to get a kind of whole picture
mm.
of the environmental conditions, and then also what is volcanism doing to these ecosystems, and how do the plant communities maybe influence sedimentation, and how does sedimentation influence those plant communities. So it was more about getting a more comprehensive picture of what environment looked like in the Columbia River.
Well, please go ahead.
And yeah, and from that we could also make some implications about whether it was more humid, was it more dry,
Yeah.
climate-wise. We cannot really put very specific numbers. It's difficult to quantify climate with just these data sets, but you can at least say it was relatively dry or relatively humid. Um, and also see, okay, is there any relationship of this more drier or wetter conditions to volcanism at that time? Because this is still a very like important topic and a highly discussed topic. How much
Yes.
is large igneous province volcanism activity influencing climate on a local
Well,
scale as well as on a global scale? So
on
we
a
were more
global
looking
scale,
at the local scale.
yeah. And it was local, but again, just to hammer the point home to everybody watching this, it wasn't one precise field site. You were using hundreds of field sites and visiting many, many field sites to kind of correlate. I mean, these beds, each individual sedimentary bed from, let's say, Ellensburg on the west to Lewiston, Idaho on the east, even if you follow a time horizon, things are changing so dramatically,
Mm.
right? You go from coarse stuff to fine stuff,
Mhm.
and my understanding before some of this more recent work is the only way to correlate across the region was to just follow these basalt flows. But it
Yeah.
feels like there's more techniques now to correlate time-wise, even though the lithologies are changing within a sedimentary bed. The pollens and other things, and these new ash beds that have been dated so
Mm.
precisely, that's exciting to see that regional story come together. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, well, I also have to thank my colleagues for that, because
Yeah.
especially the work in the more eastern part in the Lewiston um, basin and Clearwater embayment, that has been done by my PhD colleagues who kind of did exactly the same work but further east.
Oh, okay.
And then um, I was keen to put our data sets together because I already did that more detailed paper, the 2014 paper on the western part, but they haven't
Mhm.
managed to publish their work. So I said, okay, let's do that.
I
um,
see.
let's put these data together and see how it changes from one end to the other end. So yeah, it was a great team effort, really.
Really nice. Really nice. Well, I hope it feels good that a bunch of 21-year-olds are going to be reading every word of your papers very, very carefully in
Yeah,
the next
very good.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
I can put some questions together.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Well, good. I think that's plenty, and I don't know if you'll ever come back, but if you ever come back in the
So
Northwest, please come visit our little town, and I'll take you out to lunch,
I
and we can
will.
just keep chatting about this. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
sounds great. Thank you.
thank you for your time. Would you hold the line, please? I'll just stop the recording, Elena, and then we'll just
Sure.
do a couple more minutes. So, thank you for your time, Doctor.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.